Peace is not something that someone else can give you. It does not come from people treating you kindly. It does not come from circumstances working in your favor. Peace does not live outside of you. It is something you have to build, little by little, within yourself. And most importantly, peace is your responsibility. When you place your emotions in someone else's hands, you hand over control of your mood to the world. Someone gets angry, you react. Someone criticizes you, you become defensive. Someone goes silent, you feel insecure. You begin to live in reaction. And reaction is not a place where peace can exist. People often say, I am angry because he let me down. I am sad because she doesn't care. I am upset because they didn't respect me. But all of that is just shifting emotional responsibility from inside to outside. The truth is, no one can make you feel anything unless you allow it. You cannot control the behavior of others, but you can always choose how you respond. This does not mean you become numb. It does not mean you ignore injustice or dismiss pain. It simply means you stop letting the behavior of others define your emotional state. You reclaim ownership of your feelings, so you are no longer dragged around by the unconscious actions of the world. Think of a woman who steps out every morning and gets caught in the anger of others. Someone cuts her off in traffic, she explodes. Someone forgets to say thank you, she feels dismissed. Someone speaks harshly, she feels unappreciated. Every small action from others throws her day off course, not because they are powerful, but because she has allowed her emotions to depend on them. But then she begins to learn how to pause. Instead of reacting instantly, she breathes deeply. Instead of holding on to anger, she asks herself one simple question: is this really worth trading my peace for? And most of the time, the answer is no. No one is worth losing your inner stillness over, simply because they haven't yet learned how to manage themselves. When you treat peace as a personal responsibility, you start living differently. You become selective about what deserves your attention. You no longer feel the need to prove your point in every conversation. You stop defending yourself just to protect your pride. You stop needing to be understood by everyone, because you know this one truth: inner peace is always more important than outer approval. What matters is not whether the world is peaceful. What matters is whether you are strong enough to hold on to your peace. That kind of peace is not avoidance. It is an intentional choice. No one else can live your life for you. No one else can take responsibility for your emotions. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you step into a kind of freedom that no one can take away. Peace is a gift, but no one gives it to you. Only you can choose to keep it, nurture it, and protect it. As long as you wait for someone to behave properly so you can feel calm, you remain independent. But the moment you take responsibility for your peace, that is the moment you begin to truly grow. In the middle of hurtful words, unconscious actions, and moments that could trigger an outburst, there is always a small pause, a breath, a second of awareness, a thin space between impulse and reaction. And within that pause, you have the chance to choose who you will become. Most people never see that pause. They live in reflex. Someone insults them, they react. Someone judges them, they defend. Someone dismisses them, they get angry. But emotional reflex is not strength. It is just habit. And that habit can change if you begin to see the value of something seemingly small, the pause. The moment you pause is not a sign of slowness. It is a sign of mastery. It is the moment you interrupt the old reaction to create a new response. In that pause, you do not let anger take the lead. You do not let pain drive your action. You allow calm to rise, and from that place you respond from wisdom, not from wounds. Imagine you are in a tense conversation. Someone shifts blame onto you, says something unfair. Your instinct wants to react. Your voice wants to rise. Your heart wants to defend. But if, in that exact moment, you can take one deep breath and pause for 3 seconds, something unexpected happens. The anger softens, the urgency fades, and you no longer need to react just to feel seen. People often think sharpness is about speed, but in truth, real sharpness is the ability to slow down, because in that slowing down, you create space to discern what should be held and what should be released. Not every conversation needs a comeback. Not every word is worth trading your peace for. That pause is not just in conflict. It exists in every moment where you are tempted to react. When someone ignores you, when you are misunderstood, when you feel unappreciated. In all those moments, you have the power to choose follow the old pattern or create a new outcome by pausing. A woman who learns the power of the pause no longer lives on autopilot. She no longer lets emotion drive behavior. She observes before she responds. She listens to herself before she replies to others. And every time she pauses, she is rebuilding a stronger version of herself from within. The pause is where you shift from defense to awareness. It is where you choose calm over chaos. It is where you recognize what truly matters in this moment and what is just noise. You do not need to be the quickest to respond. You need to be the deepest in response. And that begins the moment you dare to pause. Not to avoid, but to understand. Not to weaken, but to strengthen. The moment you learn to pause is the moment you take back your power. You stop living at the mercy of other people's words. You stop reacting just to protect your pride. You simply pause, breathe, and choose again. Choose response over reaction. Choose peace over confrontation. Choose the person you are becoming over the person you used to be. And from there, everything begins to change. Not from the outside, but from within you. The difference between someone who remains calm and someone who is easily shaken does not lie in the emotions they feel, but in how they manage those emotions. Everyone feels hurt, anger, disappointment, but not everyone allows those emotions to dictate their behavior. The difference lies in emotional discipline. Emotional discipline does not mean suppressing or denying your emotions. It is not about pretending to be okay when you are hurting. On the contrary, it means recognizing your emotions without letting them lead your actions. It is about staying steady in the middle of the wave, not running from it. When someone makes you angry, the reflex is to strike back. When someone doesn't listen, the reflex is to speak louder. When misunderstood, the reflex is to explain. But if every action you take is a reflex, then anyone can control you. One careless word, one inattentive gesture, one disapproving look is enough to knock you off balance. And that means your peace is dependent on the behavior of others. Each time you react, you allow the outside world to control your inner world. You let them touch your ego, and the ego reacts instantly. But if you can observe your emotion before acting, you create space between you and the trigger. And in that space, you get to choose what is best for you, not what is quickest. Think of a familiar situation. You are in a meeting, you speak with confidence, and a colleague interrupts with a comment that makes you feel dismissed. In the past, you might have pushed back. Your voice gets louder, your heart beats faster, your words sharpen, but afterward you regret it. Not because you were wrong, but because you allowed them to pull you into behavior that does not reflect who you want to be. But now, with emotional discipline, you respond differently. You still feel the sting, but you do not let it lead your actions. You pause, breathe, and respond from confidence, not defense. Maybe you say nothing in that moment. Maybe you simply observe. Maybe you wait for a better time to set a boundary. And in the end, you remain yourself. That is emotional discipline. A person with emotional discipline is not emotionless. They feel deeply. but they know when to let emotion step forward and when to let reason take the lead. They do not avoid pain, but they do not let pain define them. They are not always right, but they always choose responses they won't regret later. Emotional discipline does not come overnight. It is a practice. Each time you choose silence over reaction, you are practicing. Each time you walk away from a meaningless argument, you are practicing. Each time you say no without needing to explain, you are practicing. And with each act of practice, you grow stronger. Not in loudness, but in quiet control. Power is not in the loudest voice. It is in the stillest mind. No one can shake you if you know what you are living for. No one can unnerve you if you no longer need to react to prove your worth. Emotional discipline is the ability to live inside the storm without letting the storm live inside you. And when you master that, people may still behave poorly, but they can no longer disturb your peace. Not because they stop causing problems, but because you no longer allow them to decide what is worth your peace. That is not indifference. That is maturity. And in a noisy world, that maturity is what separates those who react from those who lead their lives. Forgiveness is not a reward for the one who hurt you. It is not a sign of weakness or proof that you have forgotten everything. Forgiveness is a quiet act, a private release, not for them, but for you. Some people hold on to anger like a shield. They believe that as long as they are angry, they still have control over the story. They think that by not letting go, the other person remains trapped in guilt. But the truth is, anger doesn't imprison anyone except you. It doesn't hold them in the past. It only holds you therein, a moment that has already passed, in a story you cannot rewrite. Forgiveness does not mean accepting what was wrong. It does not mean pretending the pain was insignificant. Forgiveness is the choice to stop carrying it forward into your life. It is the moment you decide the pain has lasted long enough. You choose not to let an old memory cloud a new future. You choose not to let someone else's name control your emotions. You choose not to let a past action define how you feel today. Think of a woman who was betrayed. She couldn't believe someone she loved could do that to her. She carried the pain for years. Every new relationship felt suspicious. Every act of kindness made her defensive. Every delay made her anxious, not because the new person did something wrong, but because the old wound was still there, never released. Then one night, sitting alone, she realized the one who hurt her was no longer present, but the anger still was. And the one still living with that pain was her, not anyone else. Not because the other person never apologized, but because she hadn't been ready to set it down. And in that moment she understood. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is refusing to let old pain live in the present. Forgiveness doesn't need a conversation. It doesn't need an explanation. It doesn't need an apology. Forgiveness is something you can do silently, alone, from the deepest place of self-respect. When you choose to forgive, you are choosing relief. A mind free of resentment, a heart free of bitterness, a night of sleep uninterrupted by imaginary conversations. Sometimes, the person you most need to forgive is yourself, for staying too long in a place that no longer served you, for being silent when you should have spoken, for loving so much that you forgot your own boundaries. But healing never comes from endless self-punishment. It only begins when you look at yourself with compassion. You did the best you could with the awareness and experience you had at the time. And if you know it wasn't enough, what you need is learning, not self-blame. Forgiving yourself is the first step to growth. It's how you stop defining yourself by the mistake and start defining yourself by how you rose from it. No one has the right to hold you in pain. And you don't need to hold someone in your mind waiting for a perfect ending. Some closures never arrive the way you hoped, but that doesn't stop you from beginning again. Forgiveness is something you do not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. And in that peace, you no longer need to win. You no longer need to be right. You only need to be free. There is nothing more powerful than someone who has learned how to sit still within themselves, not because they no longer feel, but because they no longer let their emotions dictate their life. They no longer live to react. They live to choose. They no longer ask others who they are. They begin to ask themselves, who do I want to become? We live in a world full of noise. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has something to say about you. They say you're too quiet, then too loud. They praise your strength, then call you cold. And if you keep living to react to each of those opinions, you will be left with nothing but exhaustion. Every time you react, you allow someone else to decide what matters to you. Every time you react, you give away energy that should have been reserved for yourself. Mastery doesn't begin with controlling others. It begins with controlling yourself. It is the ability to pause in a moment of impulse and choose a response you can be proud of. It's when someone offends you, but you stay calm and choose not to offend them back. Not because you are afraid, but because you are strong enough not to prove anything to anyone anymore. Mastery does not mean you stop taking action. It means you act with intention, not to retaliate, but to remain whole. The person who has mastery knows when to walk away and when to stand still, when to speak and when to stay silent, when to hold on and when to let go. Picture yourself in the middle of a heated argument. The other person is trying to corner you, waiting for you to explode, waiting for you to lose control. But instead of falling into the same old trap, you smile, hold your tone steady, and say only what needs to be said. That is power. Not because you won, but because you didn't lose yourself. You don't need applause to know you're right. You don't need agreement to hold your ground. You know you're living in alignment with your values, and that is enough. That is why we're sharing this with you today. If this message resonates with your journey, feel free to leave a comment below. Share with us a moment when you chose peace over reaction. We read every story, and maybe your voice will be the light someone else needs to hear. If you know someone in your life who needs to hear this, don't hesitate to share this video with them. Because the power of calm isn't something reserved for a few. It's something we can learn, cultivate, and pass on to one another. And if you want to keep walking the path of building inner strength, growing your mindset, and living with grounded peace, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Each week, we share stories, lessons, and gentle reminders to help you return to the best version of yourself. Because sometimes, what you need is not to change the whole world. It's to pause long enough to hear your own voice again. And from that space, everything begins to shift. You no longer react. You begin to discern. You no longer ask permission to be yourself. You simply live in alignment with your inner truth. And from that place, you have nothing to prove. You only need to be present, calm, clear, grounded. That's not something you were born with. It's something you practice every day. And if you're here, reading these final lines, you've already begun. And that is a beginning worth honoring.